The electric vehicle space in India, a lot of new entrants, a lot of new additions to the portfolio of various existing EV players and companies that are looking to expand into EV business in years to come, perhaps.
Absolutely, Shweta, and I think EV is a sector that both of us, in fact all three of us, have been tracking fairly closely. Even though we've been doing that sitting in our studios and not really have had the opportunity to go and speak to a lot of four-wheeler EV makers yet. But I think great news coming in from this whole electrification drive that Indian automobile makers have embarked upon. And let's look at the data that is coming in from Tata's 58th AGM that was held yesterday. And Tata has some fairly aggressive, extensive EV plans, to a point that it's saying that 50% of its Tata Motors fleet is going to turn electric by 2030. And the government's target is 30% of all four-wheelers operating in the country to be electric. Tata Motors has upped that by 20%, saying that 50% of its fleet is going to be electric by 2030. And on the premium side, which is JLR, a company that Tata Motors bought, a UK-based company that Tata Motors bought, 65% of JLR's fleet is going to run on green technologies. Not necessarily electric, but green technologies. So we'll come to what green technologies also are. Now, back home, I think domestically, electric versions of the Tata Harrier, the SUV, and it's been a sort of bestseller SUV, one of the one of the cars that has been able to adapt the best of JLR's design and the ruggedness required on Indian roads, and sold like hot potatoes. Well, not at the price at which potatoes are selling today, but anyway. So an electric version of the Harrier is expected to be launched this year, along with the electric version of the Punch, which is their entry-level small car. And there's a new Curvv electric vehicle, which is likely to be launched in Q1 of FY25. So April, May, June,
by this time next year,
by around this time. A little earlier than this time next year is when we should expect the Curvv to be launched as well, a fully electric vehicle. Now, on the premium side, JLR is likely to take all electric Range Rover and Range Rover Sports orders beginning this year. And the sedan Jaguar is going to come with all electric vehicles across the whole series of JLR by calendar year 2025. Now, specifically, let's look at also the other sort of joint ventures that Tata Motors is doing, and this one comes with the technology company called Cummins. And Tata Motors has invested in hydrogen technology through this JV with Cummins. And apparently, the green energy that I spoke about just some time back is not necessarily going to be all electric. This green technology could also come by way of hydrogen-based internal combustion engines. So the ICE technology, instead of being dependent on fossil fuels like petrol or diesel, could actually look at hydrogen being the input into the engine. So it's not going to be all electric, but I think the remnants of the traditional automobile ICE engines that we know are also going to get a nice greener tinge to them with this hydrogen fuel coming in, except that Tata Motors is right now saying that it may not be looking at hybrid at all. That's on the Tata front. I've also got some news on Hyundai and Kia, but we could
and
come
also
to that. Also
Maruti for that matter.
And Maruti.
Yes.
Now, on hydrogen, a few days back, even Reliance announced that they are going to be offering affordable hydrogen fuel for the India markets, and they are going big on it. So that the alternate fuel on petrol is not just EVs, as you mentioned. Big companies are looking at hydrogen in a very confident manner, if I may say so.
And that is important because, I remember about a couple of months ago, we were discussing future of mobility, and one of the key crucial aspects that we talked about is whether EVs are the future of mobility. What happens after a certain point where there are enough number of electric vehicles on the road, but not enough charging infrastructure, or generating of electricity is also a major constraint. So what other alternatives do we have that are greener and not just vehicles that are powered by electricity?
That's right. I think that's exactly where hydrogen-based ICE engines come in, and even the hybrid technology, which gives you a much better mileage on every liter of traditional fuel that goes into the tank. So I mean, while the pollution is not going to be any greener, but at least in absolute terms, over a period of time,
Way
when you drive
lesser.
the car, it's way lesser in a per kilometer fuel consumption and fuel-based pollution emission. But let's move on to Hyundai and let's look at the data which is coming from Hyundai and its sister concern Kia Motors as well. You spoke about you know, this aggression of you know, of Indian automobile brands taking to greener routes, and Hyundai is saying that it's going to launch 5 new electric vehicles by 2032. I'm not sure for the second largest automaker that's a big enough number. Right now, it's just got 2 electric vehicles on the roads of India. One, of course, being the Kona, the other being the Iconic. Both of these ultra expensive, if you ask me. I think, you know, difficult for a middle class salaried employee, people like us, to afford those cars just yet. But you spoke about charging stations and charging infrastructure, and Hyundai is also likely to invest in that, and is saying by 2027 it's going to have about 440 odd charging stations installed across India. Not sure if that's a big number. 440 doesn't seem like a big number, but at least an automaker looking at after sales, looking at pretty much what we could otherwise refer to as the petrol pumps, right? So this is the downstream of driving an electric vehicle. In addition to that, it's saying that it's pledging to invest 20,000 crore rupees in its Tamil Nadu plant over the next 10 years, which is likely to give a boost not just to the domestic consumption of the electric vehicles or the traditional fuel vehicles that Hyundai is producing, but also the export cycle. Let's move on to Kia Motors, and Kia Motors is saying that it's now looking at producing a small-sized EV, a small-sized EV pretty much like the likes of MG Comet perhaps, specifically for the Indian market. So while its fleet of Seltos, Sonet, Carens do not have electric versions yet, it's looking at getting a small-sized EV specifically for the Indian market. Remember, Kia Motors is a sister concern of Hyundai Motors, and the brand also hopes that it can take up its market share from about 6 to 7% right now up to about 10% in coming years. Now, since we are talking about EV, I think we can't leave behind Tesla. We can't leave behind MG Motors. So Tesla, as we know, we're just recapping for our audience, has initiated talks with the government to have a 24,000 USD, or at present conversion rates, a 20 lakh rupee car specifically made in India, Tesla, for the Indian consumer. In addition to that, of course, we see that MG Motors and BYD, Build Your Dreams, the Chinese brands, are facing trouble in India right now because of their Chinese roots and Chinese connect. So that's right now how I see the auto space in EV panning out.
And MG, of course, looking for an Indian partner, which it has made clear so far that they are looking for a majority stakeholder, a company which is Indian essentially, so they can, in a sense, surpass their existing troubles with Chinese ownership. Yes, Amit.
Just to add to that, how serious at least Tata and Hyundai are about EVs is Tata Power, not Tata Motors, has already gone into a joint venture with Hyundai Motors to set up DC 60 kV charging stations across 29 cities. Right now, and these will be on the Hyundai dealerships. Right now, the Hyundai dealerships have a 7.2 AC kilowatt hour charging stations. So it will be upgraded to 60 kilowatt, and this is a joint venture between Tata Power and Hyundai. So that's how serious at least these two companies are about building not just their cars but the infrastructure across India.
All right, of course, and we'll continue to bring you details.